Have you ever spent countless hours memorizing vocabulary lists, only to draw a complete blank when trying to actually speak a foreign language? You're not alone. And what if I told you that one of history's greatest scientists discovered a method that could transform how you learned languages forever? Has this ever happened to you? You've diligently studied vocabulary flashcards for weeks, memorized conjugation tables, and yet when you attempt a real conversation, your mind freezes completely. This frustrating experience isn't your fault. It's the result of an outdated learning approach that even our most sophisticated educational systems still cling to. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize-winning physicist and renowned for his revolutionary learning techniques, identified a fundamental flaw in how we approach language acquisition. Our brains simply aren't wired to retain disconnected information. Those isolated vocabulary lists. They're working against your brain's natural learning mechanisms, not with them. Stay with me until the end, because Feynman's method flips traditional language learning completely upside down. Instead of treating languages as collections of words to memorize, he approached them as interconnected systems of meaning, living networks of ideas that only make sense in context. What you're about to discover might surprise you, especially if you've struggled with traditional language courses in the past. The secret lies in abandoning the memorization trap entirely. Think about how you learned your native language. Did anyone hand you vocabulary lists as a child? Of course not. You absorbed language naturally through immersion and usage. Feynman recognized this fundamental truth and developed a method that recreates this natural acquisition process, even for adult learners. The cornerstone of his approach is active engagement from day one. Rather than passively consuming information, Feynman insisted on immediate application, speaking, writing, explaining concepts, even with the most rudimentary vocabulary. This creates neural pathways that strengthen with each use, embedding the language into your procedural memory, rather than your easily overwhelmed short-term memory. What makes this method particularly powerful is how it harnesses your brain's existing learning mechanisms instead of fighting against them. When you attempt to explain a concept in a new language, even with limited vocabulary, your brain is forced to work creatively with what it knows. This struggle, while uncomfortable, is precisely what creates lasting knowledge. And here's what most language courses never tell you. Fluency isn't about perfect grammar or extensive vocabulary. It's about communicative confidence. Feynman's approach builds this confidence from the very beginning by focusing on functional usage rather than theoretical perfection. But how exactly does this revolutionary method work in practice? What specific techniques can you start implementing today to transform your language learning journey? The answers might challenge everything you thought you knew about acquiring a new language. If you found this approach to language learning valuable, hit that subscribe button to join our community of learners using these proven techniques. I'm constantly sharing methods that challenge traditional learning approaches and help you achieve real results faster. Let me share a hidden truth that transformed my own language learning journey. When I first encountered Japanese grammar with its unfamiliar sentence structures, I felt completely overwhelmed. The traditional textbook approach presented these complex patterns as rigid rules to memorize, and I was drowning in exceptions and special cases. That's when I discovered the power of Feynman's simplification principle. Complex grammatical structures are often the biggest roadblock for language learners. They seem impossibly intricate until you apply Feynman's mindset. Break down these intimidating structures into their simplest components. His revolutionary insight was that if you can't explain a grammar rule in straightforward terms, you don't truly understand it yet. This revelation completely shifted my approach. Instead of memorizing conjugation tables, I started identifying the underlying patterns. Take the dreaded subjunctive mood in Spanish, for instance. Rather than viewing it as a complex set of exceptions, I saw it as simply expressing uncertainty or emotion. This mental shift from complexity to simplicity creates a profound impact on your learning curve. The process begins with mastering basic patterns first. Just like building a house, you need a solid foundation before adding intricate details. By thoroughly understanding simple structures, you create mental frameworks that naturally accommodate more complex concepts later. This progressive building approach mirrors how we learned our native language, starting with simple sentences before gradually incorporating sophisticated expressions. But here's where Feynman's method takes an unexpected turn that leads to remarkable breakthroughs. The most powerful technique in his approach isn't studying, it's teaching. When you attempt to explain a language concept to someone else, something magical happens in your brain. The very act of articulation forces you to organize your thoughts and identify precisely where your understanding falls short. This teaching component creates a powerful feedback loop. Imagine explaining Spanish verb conjugations to a friend and suddenly realizing you're not entirely clear on irregular verbs. That moment of uncertainty isn't a failure. It's a targeted discovery of exactly what you need to study next. Instead of reviewing everything, you can focus your energy precisely where it matters most. What's particularly brilliant about this approach is that you don't actually need a student. You can teach an imaginary person, talk to your pet, or simply explain concepts aloud to yourself. The cognitive benefits come from the articulation process itself, not from having an audience. This technique has been a behind-the-scenes secret of many polyglots who seem to absorb languages with unusual speed. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how Feynman leveraged our brain's natural connection-making abilities to bypass the memorization process entirely. The next techniques completely eliminate the need for those tedious vocabulary drills while creating lasting fluency. If you've ever experienced that frustrating moment when grammar rules just wouldn't stick, write in the comments, simplify to understand. One of the most powerful revelations in Feynman's approach is understanding how our brains naturally process new information. Think about it. When you encounter something unfamiliar, your mind instinctively tries to connect it to something you already know. This isn't just a coincidence, it's the foundation of all learning, and Feynman brilliantly incorporated this insight into his language acquisition strategy. Rather than treating a new language as an alien system completely disconnected from your native tongue, Feynman encouraged identifying the bridges between them. These connections create mental anchors that transform seemingly random vocabulary into meaningful additions to your existing knowledge framework. For instance, if you're learning Spanish and encounter the word biblioteca, recognizing its similarity to bibliophile, a book lover, creates an immediate connection that bypasses the need for rote memorization. This connection-making extends beyond individual words. When you recognize that question formations in French follow patterns similar to English, or that Japanese sentence structures mirror concepts you already understand, you're creating neural highways between your established knowledge and new information. These connections fundamentally alter your learning journey, making the unfamiliar feel increasingly familiar with each discovery. The transformation happens behind the scenes in your brain. New vocabulary and grammar patterns aren't stored as isolated facts, but integrated into your existing mental landscape. This integration is what makes the difference between temporarily memorizing information and truly absorbing a language. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of Feynman's method, and the one that requires the biggest mindset shift for most learners, involves completely reframing how we view mistakes. In traditional education, Errors are treated as failures, sources of embarrassment to be avoided at all costs. Feynman turned this perspective completely upside down. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, he recognized them as the most precise feedback mechanism possible. When you make an error in conversation, it isn't a reflection of inadequacy. It's a personalized signpost pointing exactly where your understanding needs reinforcement. This revelation liberates you from the paralyzing fear that prevents so many language learners from ever attempting real conversations. Consider the hidden truth that fluent speakers aren't those who never make mistakes. They're the ones who made thousands of errors and learned from each one. By tracking patterns in your mistakes, you create something invaluable, a personalized curriculum that focuses precisely on your unique learning needs. No textbook or app can provide this level of customization. What's particularly powerful about this approach is how it transforms the emotional landscape of language learning. Instead of dreading errors, you begin to welcome them as the most direct path to improvement. This fundamental shift creates a positive feedback loop where each conversation becomes an opportunity for growth rather than a test to pass or fail. The deeper psychology at work involves recognizing that language acquisition isn't a linear process, but a spiral of continuous refinement. Each error correction cycle brings you closer to natural fluency in a way that no amount of theoretical study ever could. If you've ever felt that moment of embarrassment when making a language mistake, but then realized it actually helped you learn, type in the comments. Mistakes are my teachers. So there you have it, Feynman's revolutionary approach that transforms language learning from a tedious memory exercise into an intuitive, natural process. What I love most about this method is how it works with your brain's natural learning mechanisms instead of against them, making the journey not just more effective, but genuinely enjoyable. If you found value in these insights today, I'd love to have you join our community of language learners and lifelong students. Hit that subscribe button so we can continue exploring these powerful learning techniques together. Our channel is dedicated to uncovering these kinds of transformative approaches that challenge conventional wisdom and deliver real results. I'm curious, did any of these techniques resonate particularly strongly with you? If you made it all the way through and plan to implement Feynman's method in your own language learning journey, drop a comment saying, "Ready to teach what I learn." Your insights not only help me create better content, but also inspire others facing similar challenges. That like button is there for a reason. If this approach shifted your perspective on language learning even a little bit, giving the video a thumbs up helps others discover these techniques too, and I genuinely appreciate that connection. Speaking of connections, I've created a video right here on how to create immersive learning environments at home, even if you can't travel to a country where your target language is spoken. It pairs perfectly with Feynman's method and might be exactly what you need to accelerate your progress. Click and continue the conversation with me over there. I think you'll find it equally valuable for your language learning transformation.